His phone lit up during dinner. A woman's name I did not know. The message just said, "It's ready." Jason's hand moved before I even processed what I had read. He turned the phone face down in one quick, deliberate motion, as if covering something dangerous. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. I felt my throat tighten. I asked, "Who's Laura G?" He did not look at me. He kept cutting into his salmon, chewing like he had not heard me. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat. "Not your business." That was not how we talked to each other. In 8 years of marriage, I had never heard him use those words with me. We had argued before, sure, but never shut each other out like that. I set my fork down. The sound of metal against the plate seemed too loud. I waited, thinking maybe he would laugh, tell me it was a coworker or some vendor from his job. But he just kept eating, shoulders stiff. His eyes stayed on his plate, as if I was not even at the table. I swallowed the rest of my wine in one sip. My appetite was gone. The air in the room felt heavier than a few minutes ago. He reached for his glass of water, hand brushing the phone, keeping it close. We finished in silence. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall, every second stretching longer than it should. He cleared his plate, rinsed it in the sink, and walked to the living room without saying a word. When I was alone in the kitchen, I picked up my phone and typed Laura G into Facebook. Nothing came up that made sense. No familiar faces, no mutual friends. I checked Instagram, scrolled through dozens of profiles, most of them private, then LinkedIn. Still nothing. Jason and I had always shared everything: passwords, calendars, bank accounts. He had my email login, I had his. We never hid our phones, or at least I thought we never did. I walked into the living room. He was on the couch, phone in hand, screen tilted away from me. His thumb moved quickly, tapping, swiping. I asked again, "What's ready?" He did not look up. "Work thing." "What kind of work thing?" He put the phone down, face down again, and said, "Drop it." The words landed like a door slamming shut. We watched TV after that, though I could not tell you what show it was. I kept glancing at his phone every time it buzzed. Once, he picked it up and stepped into the hallway before reading a message. Around 10, he said he was tired and went upstairs. I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to answer emails. I listened to him walk around overhead, then the sound of the bedroom door opening. His footsteps came down the stairs, slower this time, almost careful. I leaned back in my chair so I could see into the hallway. He was at the counter, phone glowing in the dark, fingers moving fast. His posture was tense, like he was racing to finish something. When I stepped into the kitchen, he jumped slightly. "Could not sleep," I said. "Me neither," he replied, locking the phone and slipping it into his pocket. He went back upstairs. I stayed in the dark kitchen, staring at the empty counter where his phone usually sat charging overnight. By morning, I had almost convinced myself it was nothing. But when I came down, the phone was in his jacket pocket, zipped shut. He left for work without kissing me goodbye. He mumbled something about being late and walked out quickly, avoiding my eyes. That afternoon, I opened our shared laptop and checked the email account we both use for bills and subscriptions. Nothing unusual. I tried to log into his personal email. The password was wrong. I tried the 2 other passwords he used for everything. Still wrong. I sat there staring at the incorrect password message, feeling like I had just found a locked door inside my own house. When he came home, I was making dinner. He set his phone on the counter, locked, face down, like it had been all day. I asked how his day went. Busy, he said. I suggested we go out that weekend. Maybe stay somewhere overnight. He shook his head. I have things to take care of. After dinner, he rinsed his plate and said he had to run a quick errand. He did not say where, and he did not offer to take me along. When the door closed behind him, I walked over to the counter and picked up his phone. Still locked. I tried our anniversary date. Wrong. My hands were shaking as I put it back exactly the way it had been. He came home half an hour later, empty-handed. No bags, no receipts, no reason for the trip. That night, lying next to him in bed, I listened to his breathing. Steady, calm, as if he had nothing on his mind. My own eyes stayed open, tracing the ceiling in the dark. Because if it was nothing, why did it feel like the beginning of everything falling apart? The morning after that night, I went to work as usual. I kept replaying Jason's face in my head. The way he avoided looking at me. The quickness of his hands when he flipped the phone. My chest felt tight the entire day. By late afternoon, I had convinced myself I needed a distraction. I had ordered a new coffee maker online a week earlier, and the tracking showed it was ready for pickup at the post office. I figured running the errand would give me a reason to be out of the house when Jason got home. The post office was quiet when I walked in. The air smelled faintly of paper and cardboard. I handed my ID to the clerk, a woman I had seen there many times before. She disappeared into the back room and returned with a large box. My name and our home address were printed neatly on the label. As I signed for it, she set another box on the counter. "And this one too," she said. I frowned. The label on the second box caught my eye immediately. It had Jason's full name, but the recipient address was different. An apartment in a part of town we never went to. I told her there must be a mistake. She checked the tracking number, then shrugged. "It's listed under your account. You're authorized to pick it up." I hesitated. My hand hovered over the box. The tape along the edges was sealed perfectly, and the sender's address was from a store I did not recognize. I asked how long it had been there. She glanced at the computer. 2 days. I thanked her and walked out with both boxes stacked in my arms. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingers. The coffee maker box went into the back seat of my car. The other one, Jason's. I sat in the passenger seat. I stared at it through the windshield for a moment before starting the engine. The drive home felt longer than usual. My eyes kept flicking to the box beside me. I thought about pulling over and calling Jason to ask about it, but the thought of hearing his voice lie to me again stopped me. At home, I carried both boxes inside. I set mine down on the kitchen counter and slid his under the dining table. I told myself I would wait, that I would give him a chance to explain before jumping to conclusions. But by the time evening came, he still had not mentioned anything about picking up a package. He walked in from work, kissed the top of my head like nothing was wrong, and went upstairs to change. During dinner, I waited for him to bring it up. He didn't. We ate in the same strange quiet we had the night before. Afterward, when he went to take a shower, I walked into the dining room and pulled the box out from under the table. I carried it into the kitchen, feeling the weight shift inside as I set it on the counter. The tape was smooth under my fingertips. My hands were shaking. I knew I should wait, but something in me had already decided. I found a knife in the drawer and slit the tape open. Inside, I saw smaller boxes wrapped in brown paper. The first one I unwrapped held a set of women's clothing. A blouse, a pair of jeans, still with the tags on. They were not my size. The second had a pair of children's sneakers, tiny enough for a toddler. I set them on the counter, staring at them as if they would explain themselves. The sneakers were new, bright white with a red stripe. The blouse was folded perfectly, the fabric crisp. I heard the shower turn off upstairs. My stomach tightened. I quickly rewrapped the items and shoved them back into the box, pressing the flaps closed as best I could. When Jason came down, his hair damp, he glanced at the counter but didn't seem to notice anything out of place. I forced a smile and asked about his day. He gave short answers, his eyes drifting to his phone on the table. After a few minutes, I asked, "Did you order something recently?" He didn't look up. "Yeah. Why?" "It came today. I picked it up at the post office." His head turned sharply. "What box?" "The one with your name on it, but the address was different." He paused, then said, "It's for a colleague." I asked, "Why would you send it to another address? And why was it under your name?" He shrugged, already looking away. "It's just easier that way. Don't worry about it." I watched him pick up his phone and start typing, his thumbs moving quickly. His face was calm, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker, like he was already somewhere else in his mind. I wanted to ask who the clothes were for. I wanted to ask about the sneakers. But the way he sat there, leaning back in his chair, with his phone in his hands, made me stay quiet. He didn't mention the box again that night. Neither did I. But every time I walked past the dining table, I thought about it sitting there, sealed again, holding things that didn't belong in our life. And the more I thought about it, the more I knew one thing. Whatever Jason was doing, he didn't want me to see it. Jason never brought up the box again. He didn't ask if I had looked inside, and I didn't tell him I had. But from that night on, something shifted. He started keeping his phone on him at all times. If he left the room, it went with him. Even when he showered, I heard the faint ping of it on the bathroom counter, notifications coming through. The lock screen never lit long enough for me to see who they were from. The next few days were like walking around with a splinter under my skin. Every small thing felt sharp. On Wednesday night, he fell asleep on the couch, watching a basketball game. I sat in the armchair, pretending to scroll through my own phone. His was in his hand, but his fingers loosened as he drifted off. I watched the screen tilt and slide onto the cushion. For a few seconds, I didn't move. Then I leaned forward and picked it up, holding my breath. The lock screen showed a missed message from the same name, Laura G. This time it read, "Everything arrived." My heart thudded against my ribs. I glanced at Jason. He was breathing steadily, eyes closed. I tried his old passcode again, and again it was wrong. I put the phone back exactly as it had been before he woke up and caught me. The next morning, he seemed normal, making coffee and talking about his schedule. But I noticed he didn't leave the phone on the counter while getting ready. It was in his pocket before he even sat down for breakfast. That Saturday, I decided to go into the box again. I waited until Jason left for the grocery store. I pulled it out from under the dining table and opened it fully this time. There was more than I had seen before. Under the blouse and sneakers were other items. A small stack of children's books, a box of crayons, a stuffed animal with the tag still attached. I lifted the plush bear, running my thumb over the soft fur. The smell of the store still clung to it. At the bottom of the box were a few folded blankets and a package of diapers. I stood there in the kitchen, staring down at everything. None of it belonged to us. We had no children, no nieces or nephews young enough for diapers. I heard the sound of Jason's car pulling into the driveway and quickly shoved everything back, pressing the tape down with the flat of my hand. By the time he walked in, I was at the sink, rinsing a glass. He set a bag of groceries on the counter. "You eat lunch?" "Not yet," I said, keeping my back to him. He didn't mention the box. The next few weeks, the distance between us grew. He was more distracted, often stepping outside to take calls. He started locking his laptop, something he'd never done before. At night in bed, he turned away from me, saying he was tired. The physical space felt wider than the mattress. One Thursday, while folding laundry, I found a receipt in the pocket of his jeans. It was from a shipping store across town, dated 2 days earlier. The items listed matched what I'd seen in the box. The total was over $200. When I asked him about it that evening, he barely looked up from his phone. "Told you, it's for a colleague." "What colleague needs children's clothes and diapers?" I pressed. He sighed, set his phone down, and met my eyes for the first time in what felt like days. "You don't know everything about my work." It wasn't just the words. It was the tone. Calm, final, like he was drawing a line I wasn't allowed to cross. That night, while he was in the shower, I went into his home office. I checked drawers, the filing cabinet, even the pockets of his jackets hanging on the back of the door. In the bottom drawer of his desk, I found a small key. It was attached to a plain metal keychain, no label. 2 different keys hung from the ring, one brass, one silver. I didn't know what either was for at the time. I slid it into my pocket before I could second-guess myself. 2 days later, I found out what it was for. Jason left for what he called a meeting late Saturday morning. I waited 15 minutes, then went to the garage and opened the trunk of his car. The key fit into a small, locked compartment built into the trunk lining. Inside was another box, smaller than the first, but sealed with the same brown packing tape. I didn't open it there. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too much. Instead, I put it back exactly the way it had been, locked the compartment, and shut the trunk. When Jason came home hours later, he acted as if nothing was unusual. He asked if I wanted to order takeout for dinner. I said yes, even though I had no appetite. That night after he fell asleep, I lay awake replaying everything in my head. The boxes, the receipts, the phone messages, the way he guarded his devices. I had no proof of anything, not really, but the pieces didn't fit into any story I could believe. On Sunday morning, I decided I couldn't keep pretending. I made coffee, sat across from him at the kitchen table, and said, "Jason, I know you're hiding something." He didn't even flinch. He just looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You're imagining things." I almost laughed, the absurdity of it, after everything I had seen. But I didn't. I just nodded slowly and got up to wash my cup. Behind me, I heard him pick up his phone and start typing again. I knew then that whatever was in those boxes, whatever Laura G meant, he wasn't going to tell me. And that left me with only one option, to find out myself. After that Sunday morning, I stopped asking Jason questions directly. Every answer he gave me only closed another door. I knew if I kept pushing, he would just move everything further out of my reach. So instead, I waited. I watched. 3 nights later, Jason fell asleep early. I sat in the living room with my laptop, pretending to work. But what I was really doing was logging into our shared online banking. I had not looked closely at the statements in months. We split bill paying. I handled utilities, groceries, and my own credit card. He covered the mortgage and his own accounts, but all of it flowed through the same joint account, and I could see the transfers he made. Scrolling through, I saw the usual charges: gas, insurance, the occasional dinner out. But then my eyes caught something that made me stop. A transfer. $2,000. The recipient, Laura Green. The date? Last month. I stared at it, thinking maybe it was some kind of loan repayment, something I had forgotten about. But then I saw another transfer. Same name, same amount. The month before. I scrolled further back. The same transfer appeared every single month for the past 6 months. Always $2,000. Always to Laura Green. My chest felt tight. I clicked into the details of one transfer. Under note, there were just 2 words: for storage. Storage? I went through all 6 payments. The notes were identical. I sat back in my chair. My mind raced through possibilities. An actual storage unit? Something she was keeping for him? Something he didn't want me to know about? The sound of footsteps on the stairs made me close the laptop so fast my fingers stung. Jason walked into the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and glanced into the living room. Still up? Couldn't sleep, I said. He nodded, drank his water, and went back upstairs. When I opened the laptop again, my hands were shaking. I took screenshots of the transactions and emailed them to my work account. I didn't know why yet, only that I didn't want them disappearing. The rest of the week, I couldn't look at him the same way. Every time he reached for his phone or left the room to take a call, my mind went straight to those payments. $2,000 a month. For storage. From a woman I didn't know existed until that text message. On Saturday morning, Jason left the house, saying he needed to check on something at the office. I waited until I heard his car pull away, then opened his desk drawers again. I didn't find any contracts or bills that explained the payments, but I did find a small stack of mail hidden behind a folder. Most of it was addressed to him at our home, but 2 envelopes were different, addressed to Laura Green at the same apartment address from the package I had picked up at the post office. The return address on both was a bank. I stuffed them back where I found them and closed the drawer. When Jason came home later, I tried to read his expression. He seemed relaxed, but in the way someone does when they're hiding something and think they've hidden it well. That night I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and replayed every interaction we'd had in the past month. The secrecy, the packages, the locked phone. Now, the money. If it had been an affair, I could have imagined certain patterns, nights away, excuses about business trips. But this was different. There were no hotel charges, no dinners for 2 on the credit card. Whatever this was, it didn't fit the shape of the affairs I'd heard about from friends. But it was still a betrayal. The following Monday, during my lunch break, I went to the bank in person. I told the teller I wanted to ask about a series of transfers from my joint account. She pulled up the details on her screen and confirmed they were going to a personal account under the name Laura Green. I asked if it was possible to see the address associated with the account. She shook her head, privacy laws, but she leaned forward slightly and said, "It matches the address on the transfer records, all the same." I thanked her and walked out, my pulse thudding in my ears. Now I had 2 solid links, the apartment address and the bank account, both tied to Laura Green. That night, Jason came home later than usual. He smelled faintly of dust, like he'd been somewhere old and unused. His shoes had traces of dirt, and his shirt was wrinkled in a way that didn't come from sitting at a desk. When I asked how his day was, he just said, "Busy," and went straight to the shower. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the closed bathroom door, and thought about the word storage again. Storage meant he was keeping something somewhere, and if he was paying that much for it every month, it wasn't just a few boxes. Whatever it was, Laura Green was the one holding it for him. By the time I went to bed that night, my decision was made. I wasn't going to wait for him to tell me. I was going to follow the money and see exactly what it was buying him. After leaving the bank that day, I knew I couldn't confront Jason yet. Every time I had pushed, he had shut down. If I wanted answers, I had to stop showing my hand. So I started watching him more carefully, memorizing the small details. I noticed the way he checked his phone before leaving for work, the way he stood by the front window scrolling for a few seconds before stepping outside. Sometimes, if I came into the room too quickly, he would lock the screen mid-message and slip the phone into his pocket. I kept the rhythm of our life the same. I made dinner, asked about his day, pretended to listen while he gave short answers. I laughed when he made small jokes. I didn't give him a reason to think I suspected anything more than I had before. One evening, while he was in the shower, I sat at his desk and opened his laptop. It was locked with a password I didn't know. That was new. He had never bothered to log out before. The next morning, I went into his office when he was still asleep and turned on the computer again. The password prompt came up. I tried our anniversary, his birth date, the name of his favorite sports team. Nothing worked. I shut it down before he could see the attempt in the login history. It was a Thursday when I saw something in his online calendar. We shared one for basic appointments and events, birthdays, doctor visits, trips. I hadn't looked closely at it in weeks. That morning, I was adding a dentist appointment for myself when I saw an entry for Saturday afternoon. It was just one word: meeting. The location was a street name I recognized, not residential, but in a part of the city where a lot of warehouse spaces and storage units were. I stared at it for a long time. Then I took a screenshot and emailed it to myself. That night at dinner, I asked if he wanted to do something together over the weekend. He said he might be busy. I asked if it was work. He shrugged. Just something I need to take care of. The word storage echoed in my head. On Saturday, he left the house at 2. I waited a full 15 minutes before grabbing my keys and leaving. The address was about 20 minutes away. When I arrived, I stayed 2 blocks back from the building. It was a row of gray, windowless units with roll-up metal doors. I saw his car parked near the middle of the row. I pulled over, heart pounding. He got out, looked around briefly, and walked toward one of the units. The door was already half open. Then a woman stepped out. She was in her late 30s, maybe early 40s. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, a jacket zipped up to her neck. I recognized her instantly from the small, grainy photo I'd found on one of the social media searches I'd done weeks ago. Laura Green. She smiled at him, and he put a hand briefly on her shoulder before they both went inside. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. I wanted to get out of the car, to walk up and demand to know what was happening. But I stayed where I was. After about 20 minutes, they both came out again. Jason locked the unit, slid the key into his pocket, and they stood talking for another minute. I couldn't hear them from where I was, but Laura gestured toward something in the distance, and he nodded. Then she turned and walked away toward a small, older sedan parked at the far end of the row. Jason got into his car and drove off. I waited until they were both gone before I pulled up closer. The unit number was painted in faded white on the metal. 43B. I memorized it, along with the name of the street and the position in the row. Back at home, Jason acted as if nothing unusual had happened. He dropped his keys on the counter, asked what was for dinner, and didn't mention where he'd been. That night, I lay in bed next to him, my mind racing with the image of him and Laura disappearing into that storage unit together. The next morning, while he was out for his run, I opened my laptop and searched for rental information on the storage facility. The website had an online portal for customers, but required a unit number and passcode to log in. I had one piece of that information. When he came back from his run, I asked how far he'd gone. He gave me a number and stepped into the shower. I listened to the water run while I thought about the key I'd found weeks ago in his desk. If that key wasn't for the car compartment, maybe it was for that unit. I knew I couldn't try it without him noticing something was missing. But the thought of that lock was now burned into my mind. Over the next week, I checked his calendar every morning. There were no more entries for meeting, but I noticed he was leaving the house earlier than usual, sometimes coming home later. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. and realized he wasn't in bed. I went downstairs and saw the faint glow of his phone in the kitchen. He was standing by the counter typing quickly. When he saw me, he said he couldn't sleep and was just catching up on some work messages. I nodded and went back upstairs without answering. 2 days later, he left his laptop bag on the couch when he went to take a call outside. I unzipped it quickly and found a folded sheet of paper. It was a printed confirmation for a payment to the storage facility, 2 months in advance. The signature at the bottom was his. I took a photo of it with my phone and slid it back exactly as I'd found it. That night, I didn't say a word to him about it. I made dinner, washed the dishes, and pretended everything was normal. But inside, I was already making a plan. If he had another meeting there, I was going to be inside that unit before he was. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days after finding the payment confirmation in Jason's laptop bag, another meeting appeared in his shared calendar. Saturday afternoon, same location as before. I spent the next 2 days rehearsing my plan in my head. I knew the unit number. I had a rough idea of his schedule. If I got there early, I could be inside before he arrived. I wasn't sure what I was going to say if I got caught, but I knew I couldn't stand another week of wondering what was behind that door. Saturday came. Jason was restless in the morning, checking his phone more than usual, answering messages with quick taps of his thumb. Around 1, he said he needed to head out early for his meeting. I asked if he wanted lunch before he left. He shook his head and grabbed his jacket. I waited until I heard the garage door close and his car pull away. Then I grabbed my keys and the small metal key I had taken from his desk weeks ago. I wasn't sure it would work, but it was the only lead I had. The drive to the storage facility felt longer than the last time. My palms were damp on the steering wheel. When I pulled up, the lot was almost empty. No sign of his car yet. I parked a few spaces away from Unit 43B and walked over, trying to look casual. The lock was a standard padlock, sturdy but old. My hands shook as I slid the key in. It turned easily. I lifted the door just enough to slip inside. The air was stale, with a faint smell of dust and cardboard. I pulled the door down behind me until only a thin strip of daylight showed near the floor. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust. Inside were rows of stacked boxes, some labeled, some blank. Along one wall, there was a sofa with worn cushions, a small coffee table, and 2 folding chairs. Against the back wall stood a tall shelving unit crammed with bins, bags, and loose items, mostly household things, but not ours. There were children's toys, a plastic kitchen set, a dollhouse, a tricycle with peeling paint, clothes hung on a portable rack, women's dresses, men's jackets, coats. A crib leaned against the wall, disassembled, with the mattress wrapped in plastic beside it. I walked slowly, running my fingers over the dust on the furniture. A stack of framed photos sat face down on the coffee table. I picked one up. It was Jason. Younger, maybe in his 20s, standing next to a woman I didn't recognize. She had dark hair, the same as Laura's, and they were both smiling at the camera. Between them was a little boy, no older than 3. I flipped through more frames. The same woman, the same boy, sometimes with Jason, sometimes without. In one, Jason was holding the boy on his shoulders. In another, the woman and Jason stood arm in arm at what looked like a birthday party. I set the frames down, my heart pounding. Who was the child? And why were their belongings hidden here? A sound outside made me freeze. The low rumble of a car pulling up. I crouched behind the shelving unit, peering through a gap between the boxes. The metal door rattled and began to rise. Jason stepped inside, followed by Laura. She was carrying a large duffel bag. Jason shut the door behind them, plunging us into dim light again. They didn't see me. From my hiding spot, I watched as Laura set the bag on the table and unzipped it. Inside were more clothes, folded neatly. Jason started moving boxes aside to make room on the shelves. They worked in silence for a few minutes. Then Laura said, "We need to figure out what to do with the rest before next month." Jason nodded. "I can cover another payment if we need to." She frowned. "You've already done enough." "I told you it's fine," he said. I stayed completely still, barely breathing. They finished unpacking the bag and sat down on the sofa. Laura leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "You think they'll ever stop looking?" Jason shook his head. "Not anytime soon." She rubbed her face with her hands. "I hate dragging you into this." "You're my sister," Jason said quietly. "You don't have to thank me." Jason's tone shifted, almost defensive. "She's not hiding in a cave," he added, as if reading my thoughts. "She moves around, keeps a low profile, changes jobs. As long as she stays out of certain places and away from certain people, she can manage without drawing attention." The word hit me like a physical blow. Sister. I stared at them from behind the boxes, trying to process what I'd just heard. In 8 years of marriage, Jason had never once mentioned having a sister. Not once. And I didn't ask about the boy in the photos. Not then. The way Jason spoke, guarded and clipped, made it clear he would shut down or lie before giving me anything real. I needed more than questions. I needed proof. They sat in silence for a few moments. Then Jason glanced at his watch. I should get going. He stood, grabbed the duffel bag, and set it near the door. Laura followed him out. The door rattled down again, leaving me in the dark. I waited a full minute before standing. My legs felt unsteady. I reached for the padlock, slid it back into place, and walked to my car without looking around. By the time I got home, Jason's car was already in the driveway. He was in the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water. He looked up and smiled faintly, like it was just another Saturday. I didn't mention where I'd been, and he didn't mention his sister. But now I knew. And the knowing felt worse than the guessing. I barely slept that night. I lay awake beside Jason, listening to his breathing, my mind replaying every word he had said to Laura in that storage unit. You're my sister. In the morning, I went through the motions: coffee, breakfast, small talk. Jason acted normal, like nothing in his life had shifted, like he hadn't been hiding an entire family member from me for almost a decade. It wasn't until late afternoon that I decided I couldn't keep it in any longer. I found him in his office, sorting through some papers. "I know about Laura," I said. His hands froze. For a moment, he didn't turn around. Then he set the papers down and looked at me. "What do you mean?" "I saw you at the storage unit. I heard everything. She's your sister." He exhaled slowly and leaned back in his chair. "So you've been following me?" "That's what you take from this?" I asked. "Not that you've been lying to me for 8 years? That you've been sending thousands of dollars every month to someone you never even mentioned existed?" His eyes narrowed. "I didn't tell you because you would react exactly like this." "Like what?" My voice was sharper than I intended. "Like someone who just found out her husband has a secret sister he's hiding from the police?" His jaw tightened. "You don't know the whole story. Then tell me." He hesitated, then stood and closed the office door. When he sat back down, he ran a hand through his hair. "Laura got into trouble years ago, before we met. She was involved with people who were running scams, taking money from clients, and disappearing. She says she didn't know it was illegal at first, but by the time she realized, it was too late. There's a warrant for her arrest." I stared at him. "And your solution was to hide her things in a storage unit and send her money every month?" "She doesn't have anyone else," he said quietly. "If I didn't help, she'd be on the street." "She could turn herself in," I said. His expression hardened. "You don't understand. Prison would destroy her." "And what about our marriage?" I asked. "Keeping something like this from me for years?" He looked away. "I was protecting you." "From what?" "The truth." He didn't answer. I walked out of the office before I said something I couldn't take back. In the kitchen, I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the sink, staring out the window. Jason didn't follow me. For the next week, we barely spoke beyond the bare minimum. I worked, came home, cooked, cleaned, and went to bed without any real conversation. He spent more time in his office with the door closed. One evening, I was in the living room when I heard him on the phone. His voice was low, but I caught enough to know he was talking to Laura. "They're still asking questions," he said. "Just stay put for now. I'll figure something out." I sat there, frozen, until I heard the office door open. I muted the TV and pretended to be reading on my phone. He walked in, glanced at me, and said, "I have to go out for a bit." "Where?" I asked. "Just something I need to check on." I didn't move from the couch as he left, but my mind was already working. The next day, I went to see a lawyer. I didn't tell Jason. I didn't even tell my best friend. I just sat in a quiet office while a man in a gray suit explained what separation would mean. Financially, legally, practically. It was the first time I'd admitted out loud that I might leave him. When I came home that evening, Jason was sitting at the kitchen table. "We need to talk," he said. I sat down across from him. "They're looking for her here now," he said. "In the city. Someone saw her a few months ago, and now there's a detective asking questions." I felt my stomach drop. "When?" He rubbed his forehead. "Last week. I didn't want to tell you until I knew more." "You mean until you decided whether to tell me at all?" I said. He didn't deny it. "What happens if they find her?" I asked. "They won't," he said quickly. I've made sure of that. I thought about the money, the storage unit, the lies. And what happens to us? I asked. His face tightened. That depends on whether you can live with this. I stood up. You're asking me to live with being married to someone who's hiding a fugitive. I'm asking you to trust me, he said. I looked at him for a long moment, then turned and walked upstairs. That night I packed a small suitcase and put it in the back of my closet, hidden under a blanket. I didn't know when I'd use it, but I knew I would. The next morning, I told him I was going to visit a friend for the weekend. He didn't ask which one. As I drove away from the house, I didn't look back. I didn't go to a friend's house that weekend. I checked into a small hotel on the other side of the city. The room was plain, the kind meant for business travelers, but it gave me what I needed most: distance. For the first 24 hours, I didn't call or text Jason. He didn't call me either. That silence told me more than words could. On Sunday morning, I went to a cafe near the hotel. While waiting for my coffee, I overheard two women at the next table talking about the new manager at the grocery store a few blocks away. One of them mentioned her name, Laura Green. It took me a moment to register it. I leaned back in my chair, listening, without making it obvious. The woman said Laura had started working there earlier in the year, part-time at first, then full-time. She lived in one of those small apartments near the park. The park they mentioned was less than a 10-minute drive from my house. I paid for my coffee and left without touching it. My mind was spinning. Jason had told me they only saw each other a couple of times a year, that she stayed hidden, moving between cities. But if this was true, she had been living within walking distance of us for months. I drove straight to the grocery store. The parking lot was busy, but I found a spot near the entrance and waited. After about 15 minutes, I saw her. She came out with a cart full of bags, pushing it toward an older blue sedan. Her hair was loose this time, falling around her shoulders, and she wore the store's uniform, a green polo shirt with the logo stitched on the chest. I stayed in my car, watching as she loaded the bags into the trunk. She moved quickly, like she didn't want to linger. When she was done, she glanced around the lot before getting into the driver's seat. I started my car and followed her out of the parking lot. She drove toward the park, then turned down a narrow residential street lined with small, aging apartment buildings. I stayed 2 cars back, making sure not to get too close. She pulled into the lot of a 3-story building with chipped paint and a faded sign that read, Maple Court Apartments. I watched her get out, carrying 2 bags in each hand, and head up the stairs to the 2nd floor. She unlocked the door to Unit 2B. I memorized the building, the number, the layout of the parking lot. Then I drove past without stopping. Back at the hotel, I sat on the bed and stared at the wall. Jason had been lying about more than just her existence. He had lied about proximity, about how often they saw each other, about the risk. That evening, I called my neighbor, Karen, under the pretense of checking in on the house. She mentioned she'd seen me leave with a suitcase. "Going anywhere nice?" she asked. "Just visiting a friend," I said. "Anything going on in the neighborhood?" She paused. "Well, I saw Jason the other day in the parking lot at the Maple Court Apartments. I was dropping off some clothes at the donation bin there, and he was coming down the stairs with a woman. Dark hair, about his age. Didn't introduce her." My hand tightened on the phone. "When was that?" "A couple of months ago," she said. "March, I think." That was the same month Jason had transferred $2,000 to Laura with the note, "For storage." It hit me then. He must believe the police didn't have her exact address, only a vague idea she was still in the city. Maybe that was why he kept visiting her, confident they weren't watching closely enough to catch him. I thanked her and ended the call. I didn't go back home that night. I needed more time to decide what to do with what I now knew. On Monday, I called in sick to work and drove back to Maple Court Apartments. I parked across the street and waited. Around noon, Laura came out, locking her door behind her. She carried a tote bag and walked toward the corner, where she caught a bus heading downtown. Once she was gone, I crossed the street. I didn't go up the stairs. I didn't want to be seen, but I stood where I could see her windows. The blinds were half open, and from where I stood, I could make out shelves along one wall, stacked with boxes that looked just like the ones in the storage unit. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't on the run. She was living her life a few blocks from me, shopping at the same stores, walking the same streets. Jason had gone to extraordinary lengths to make me believe she was somewhere far away, that their contact was rare. The realization hit me harder than I expected. Not just that he'd kept her existence a secret, but that every single detail he'd fed me about her life had been a deliberate fabrication. She wasn't hiding in another state or moving every few months. And yet, the image of the little boy in those photos never left me. Whoever he was, son, nephew, or something else entirely, Jason had hidden him from me as completely as he'd hidden Laura. She was here, building a routine right under my nose, while he kept me chasing shadows. And for what? To keep me from realizing that he had built an entire second routine, one that existed entirely outside our marriage, but right under my nose. That night, I finally went home. Jason was in the kitchen, cooking pasta. He smiled when I walked in, as if nothing had changed. "Good weekend?" he asked. "Fine," I said, hanging up my coat. I didn't mention what I'd seen. Not yet. I wanted to keep my advantage for a little longer. We ate dinner in silence. I watched the way he moved around the kitchen, the way he kept his phone on the counter, but angled toward him, never toward me. I thought about the storage unit, the boxes in Laura's apartment, the lies stacked one on top of the other. When he went upstairs, I sat at the table alone, staring at my half-empty plate. I knew the distance between us wasn't just emotional anymore. It was physical. There were whole places, whole lives, he kept sealed off from me. And now I knew exactly where they were. 3 days after I saw the boxes in Laura's apartment, my phone rang while I was at work. Jason's name lit up the screen. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text came through. "Call me. It's important." I stared at it, debating whether to ignore it. My hands hovered over the keyboard, as if continuing to work would make the message disappear. Then another text. "It's Laura. She's been arrested." I read it twice before it sank in. My chest tightened. I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. Same number. This time, I answered. "They took her this morning," Jason said without preamble. His voice was tense but controlled. "She's at the downtown precinct. I need you to come with me." I didn't speak right away. I could hear voices in the background on his end, the sound of traffic. "Why?" I finally asked. "Because they're not letting me see her. Maybe if you come, why would they let me in?" I cut him off. "I've never even met her." There was a pause. "Please. Just, please." I looked out the window at the gray sky. "No?" He sounded taken aback. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean I'm not going," I said. He was silent for a moment. Then, sharper. "This isn't about us right now. She needs help. This has always been about us, I said. Every lie you've told me, every time you've looked me in the eye and kept her a secret, that's about us. She's my family, he said quietly. I was your family too, I replied, and hung up. I turned my phone face down on the desk. My heart was pounding, but I felt strangely still inside. By the end of the day, there were 4 missed calls from him and 2 voicemails. I didn't listen to them. When I got home, his car wasn't in the driveway. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavier than silence. On the kitchen counter, his keys were gone. The drawer where he kept important papers was half open, a few folders missing. I made myself tea I didn't drink and sat at the table, listening for the sound of the garage door. It didn't come. The next morning, I woke to another text. They're moving her to county jail. I'm going to see what I can do. I didn't reply. By the 3rd day, I had stopped checking my phone as soon as it buzzed. The messages were all variations of the same plea. Come with me. She needs you. I need you. On the 4th day, I saw his car in the driveway when I got home from work. For a moment, I considered driving away and finding somewhere else to stay. But I parked, got out, and went inside. He was at the kitchen table looking exhausted. His eyes were red, and there was a deep crease between his brows. They're setting bail, he said as soon as I walked in. It's high, but I can figure it out. I put my bag down. Jason, stop. He frowned. Stop what? Stop trying to pull me into this, I said. Whatever happens to her now, it's between you and her, not me. He shook his head. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said. You made a choice. Over and over again, you chose her. You chose her over telling me the truth. You chose her over our marriage. You're still choosing her. His jaw worked like he wanted to argue, but nothing came out. I walked past him, upstairs to our bedroom. My suitcase was still in the closet, under the blanket where I had hidden it. I pulled it out and began to pack. Downstairs, I could hear him moving around, pacing. Once, he called my name. I didn't answer. When I came back down with the suitcase, he was standing in the hallway. If you walk out now, that's it, he said. I met his eyes. It's been it for a long time. I walked past him, out the front door, and down the steps to my car. I didn't look back to see if he was watching. When I got to the end of the street, my phone buzzed again. I didn't need to check to know who it was. I put it face down on the passenger seat and kept driving. For the first time in years, I didn't want to know the truth. I also didn't want to know whether Laura would make bail or if she'd finally face the charges Jason had been shielding her from. That was his battle now, not mine. What would you do in my place? Please write your thoughts in the comments. I will be happy to read them.